In a quiet suburb of the United States, the Johnson house was a refuge of love and laughter. With a sunny backyard and scattered toys, the property exuded a warm atmosphere that reflected the happy life of the family. At the heart of this home was a special bond that united Ethan, an 8-year-old boy, and his inseparable friend, Rocky, an English bulldog with a loving and mischievous spirit. Since the puppy arrived in the family, his presence brightened Ethan's days. They were companions in all adventures, exploring the backyard together, taking long walks in the nearby park, and even creating games of hide-and-seek among the trees. Rocky was always ready for a cuddle, responding to every call from his young friend with contagious enthusiasm. It was an unbreakable friendship built on laughter, playfulness, and a deep mutual understanding. The family's routine was simple, but filled with meaningful moments. Afternoons were often spent tending to the garden, where Ethan helped his parents plant flowers and vegetables. Rocky ran back and forth, excitedly jumping among the flower beds, as if he were assisting in the task. The family's laughter echoed through the air as happiness spread like the scent of freshly cultivated flowers. However, beneath the surface of this idyllic life, a shadow began to form. As the days went by, the adults exchanged worried glances and whispers that Ethan couldn't fully understand. Yet, he sensed that something was different in the air. Every night, before falling asleep, his heart tightened a little more. He felt that changes were on the way, but the happiness Rocky brought was a balm for his restlessness. On weekends, the family would often take trips to the park, where the three of them enjoyed a sea of laughter. Ethan would sit on the grass, watching Rocky chase after leaves blown by the wind, his eyes sparkling with joy. Those simple moments were all that mattered, and Ethan lost himself in the purity of childhood, unaware that reality was about to change. As the days passed, the atmosphere in the Johnson household became more tense. The adults' conversations, once cheerful and light, were now surrounded by an air of concern. Ethan tried not to think too much about it, immersing himself in his play and adventures with Rocky. But the subtleties of life warned him that something was about to change. That night, as he snuggled into his bed, Ethan looked at Rocky, who lay at his feet, breathing quietly and serenely. He stroked the bulldog's head, feeling the softness of his fur and the warm connection between them. In Rocky's eyes was a silent determination, as if both knew that life was about to become more complicated. The stars twinkled in the sky, reflecting the hope that everything would be all right. But in truth, a storm was approaching, poised to change the course of the Johnson family's history and that of their beloved furry friend. The night dragged on, and Ethan finally fell asleep, hugging his pillow while Rocky rested beside him, sensing the tranquil pulse of life in their home. Both dreamed of better days, but fate held challenges that would require more than they could imagine. The daylight began to fade, and a sense of unease hung over the Johnson house. Ethan woke up to the first rays of sunshine filtering through the window, illuminating the room and causing Rocky to stretch lazily beside him. The day seemed promising, but a dark cloud loomed over the family's happiness. After breakfast, Ethan decided to take advantage of the sunny morning to play with Rocky in the backyard. They ran, jumped, and rolled in the grass, but the fun was interrupted when their parents entered the room. Worry etched on their faces. The low but tense voices left Ethan curious. He watched from a distance as they talked, trying to understand what was happening. The words money and move echoed in his mind. Something was going on, something that could separate him from Rocky. The boy felt a tightening in his chest, a growing anxiety settling in his soul. When the adults headed to the bedroom, Ethan approached, listening in silence. He knew he shouldn't eavesdrop, but the need to understand the situation was stronger than his curiosity. "Ethan can't know yet," his mother whispered. Her voice trembled, and sadness was evident. Ethan couldn't hear the rest of the conversation, but the tone of desperation left him even more worried. While the adults discussed, Ethan sat in his favorite spot in the yard with Rocky by his side. The bulldog seemed to sense the change in the boy's mood. He rested his head on Ethan's leg, as if offering comfort. With his mind filled with confusing thoughts, Ethan stroked Rocky, trying to push away his worry. That night, the tension in the house was palpable. Ethan's parents spoke in hushed tones, and concern was evident on their faces. The boy felt helpless, like a pawn in a game whose rules he didn't understand. His heart raced, as if sensing the approach of a storm. He wondered if this change meant he would have to leave Rocky behind. The thought terrified him. The next morning, the sense of tension escalated. Upon waking, Ethan decided he needed to understand what was happening. When his parents entered the kitchen, he approached them, his voice trembling. "What's going on?" he asked. The adults exchanged glances, and Ethan's father finally sighed. The conversation could no longer be postponed. He began to explain that the family was facing financial difficulties, that the situation was unsustainable, and that they would need to move to a smaller place where they could afford the bills. Ethan's heart sank upon hearing his father's words. He didn't want to believe this meant leaving Rocky. The idea of separating from his friend, of leaving him behind, was unbearable. The conversation continued, but he got lost in his thoughts, imagining what life would be like without the bulldog. As the day progressed, worry turned to despair. The decision was made: they would need to move, and Rocky could not come with them. This devastating revelation crushed Ethan. The bond they shared seemed to be unraveling, and uncertainty about the future settled in his heart. That night, Ethan lay in bed with Rocky by his side, but the peace he usually felt with his friend nearby had vanished. He looked into the bulldog's eyes, seeking comfort, but realized that Rocky also sensed the change. The animal appeared restless, as if understanding that something was wrong. The boy clung to Rocky, his heart heavy with uncertainty. The love they shared was profound, and the thought of losing it consumed him. With tears in his eyes, he made a silent promise. He would do everything to ensure that, even in the face of difficulties, he and Rocky would stay together. The night passed slowly, and Ethan lay awake, contemplating the possibilities. He couldn't leave Rocky behind. The fear of separation darkened everything, but at the same time, determination grew within him. He knew that the bond between them was strong, and he was willing to fight for their friendship. As dawn approached, a new day loomed, bringing with it a sense of urgency. The reality of what lay ahead was difficult to accept, but Ethan was determined not to let anything stand between him and Rocky. The days passed in a whirlwind of emotions, and the Johnson family's situation seemed increasingly unsustainable. Boxes piled up in the living room, ready for the move, and the tension became a constant weight on Ethan's shoulders. The house, once filled with laughter and play, was now shrouded in a sad silence. Ethan felt trapped between two worlds, the innocence of childhood and the harsh reality looming ahead. Every morning, he woke up with a tight heart, fearing that today would be the day he had to say goodbye to Rocky. The bulldog, who had always been his source of joy, now seemed to reflect his anguish, moving slowly around the house as if aware of what was to come. Ethan's parents tried to maintain a facade of normalcy, but concern was evident in their eyes. Conversations about finances and moving became frequent, and Ethan felt that time was running out. He decided he needed to take action. He couldn't allow life to separate him from Rocky. That afternoon, while his parents were busy organizing things, Ethan decided to take Rocky for a long walk. The nearby park had always been their favorite spot, and he hoped that this time together could comfort the bulldog's heart and, perhaps, help him find a solution. As they walked, Ethan observed the world around him. The leaves on the trees were beginning to change color, signaling the arrival of autumn. The gentle breeze blew, bringing with it a familiar scent of earth and freshly cut grass. Each step was an attempt to memorize every little detail of that place that meant so much to him and Rocky. Sitting on a park bench, Ethan looked into his friend's eyes, seeking the courage to face reality. He stroked Rocky's head, reminiscing about the happy moments they had shared. The thought of leaving him behind was unbearable. He couldn't let that happen. Ethan knew he needed to be creative. If the family couldn't take Rocky with them, he had to find a solution that would allow them to stay together. The idea of asking someone to care for Rocky while his family got back on their feet began to take shape in his mind. It was a solution, but not a permanent one. With renewed determination, Ethan decided to talk to his parents. Night fell, and the house was quieter than ever. He approached his parents, who were sitting at the table reviewing the moving plans. "Can I talk to you?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The adults stopped what they were doing and looked at him, their expressions shifting from concern to attention. Ethan sat down, his heart racing as he formulated his words. "I don't want to leave Rocky. Can we find someone to take care of him until we can be together again?" His voice trembled, but the determination was clear. His parents exchanged glances, and Ethan's mother sighed, clearly torn between the pain of seeing her son suffer and the need to face reality. After a brief pause, his father spoke. "Ethan, this isn't easy. We love Rocky, but the situation is complicated. We don't know how long it will take until we can stabilize ourselves." The response felt like a bucket of cold water, but Ethan didn't give up. "I know it won't be easy, but I want to try. I don't want to lose my best friend," he insisted. The silence that followed was heavy. His parents' expressions revealed their internal struggle between logic and love for their son. Finally, Ethan's mother spoke. "We will think about it, dear. It's a difficult decision, but it's important for you to know that we're doing the best we can." With a mix of hope and despair, Ethan stepped away, determined to do whatever it took to keep Rocky by his side. The decision they would make would affect not only his life, but also the future of his most loyal friend. That night, as he lay in bed, Ethan couldn't shake the thoughts from his mind. He clung to Rocky, trying to find comfort in the presence of the bulldog. The warmth of Rocky's body was a reminder that their friendship was still real, and it gave him strength to face what lay ahead. The next morning brought a new wave of anxiety. What would his parents decide? Ethan tried to distract himself with his tasks, but uncertainty loomed over him. The thought of leaving Rocky behind consumed him, and he needed to do something. During breakfast, the tension was palpable. Ethan watched his parents talk in low voices, their expressions still bearing concern. He couldn't wait any longer. It was time to act. With renewed courage, he decided he was willing to fight for his friend. Ethan's anxiety grew with each passing day, and the sense of urgency drove him to find a solution. At school, he distracted himself by trying to focus on his classes, but his thoughts were constantly on Rocky. The possibility of losing his friend made every moment unbearable. He decided he couldn't just wait for his parents to resolve the situation. After school, Ethan met up with his friends at the park. While they played, he shared his concerns about the move and the idea of leaving Rocky behind. His friends, always supportive, listened attentively. They understood the bond Ethan had with the bulldog and were willing to help him. The suggestion of asking a neighbor for help arose, and Ethan began to think about the possibility of finding someone who could temporarily care for Rocky. With this new hope, Ethan said goodbye to his friends and ran home. Upon entering, he found his parents talking in the living room. His heart raced as he approached them. With a mix of hope and nervousness, he decided it was time to present his idea. Ethan knew that the Miller family, elderly neighbors, had always loved animals. Mr. Miller had recently lost a poodle and might be looking for a new friend. The proposal brought a glimmer of hope to the dark situation. It was a valid idea and could be the solution he was desperately seeking. After dinner, the family decided to visit Mr. Miller. Ethan felt his heart quicken, a mix of anticipation and fear. When they arrived at the neighbor's house, the atmosphere was welcoming. Mr. Miller was sitting on the porch, admiring the sunset, when he spotted the family approaching. Ethan seized the opportunity and, with a trembling voice, explained the situation. He detailed how they were facing financial difficulties and needed to move soon. The boy asked Mr. Miller if he would care for Rocky until they could get back on their feet. Mr. Miller's expression shifted to one of thoughtful consideration. He stroked his gray beard and after a few moments decided he would love to have Rocky's company. The truth was, he missed having a dog around and didn't want Ethan to feel guilty for leaving his friend behind. Ethan's heart swelled with gratitude. He knew he had found a solution, an alternative that could work. Mr. Miller seemed to be a good person, and the idea that Rocky would be in good hands eased some of the weight on his chest. That night, Ethan could barely sleep. Thoughts about Rocky's future kept him awake, but there was a small light of hope. He was determined to do whatever was necessary to ensure his friend was safe and happy. In the following days, the Johnson family began preparing for the move. Ethan helped with every task, but his mind was always focused on how he would say goodbye to Rocky. The bulldog, though seemingly oblivious to the boy's worries, seemed to sense the change in the environment. He stayed close to Ethan, as if trying to offer comfort to his friend. Finally, moving day arrived. The moving truck was parked in front of the house, and the workers began loading the boxes. Ethan's heart ached. He looked at Rocky, who appeared confused, perhaps sensing that something significant was about to happen. With his parents' help, Ethan prepared Rocky for the new phase. He put a new collar on the bulldog, and from that moment, the connection between them felt stronger than ever. The boy looked at his friend and made a silent promise. He would do everything in his power to make sure Rocky knew he wasn't alone. As the family got ready to leave, Ethan and Rocky took one last walk around the yard. He took a deep breath, trying to memorize every smell, every sound, and every moment. It was hard to accept that they were saying goodbye to a place that had been home for so long. With Mr. Miller's help, they managed to settle Rocky in the car. The bulldog's expression reflected confusion, but also a semblance of trust. Ethan stroked Rocky's head, whispering words of encouragement into his heart. As they got into the car, Ethan took one last look at the house they had called home. Tears began to slide down his face, but he was determined not to let despair consume him. This was a new phase, a new hope. The drive to Mr. Miller's house was quiet, but the emotion inside Ethan was palpable. He needed to believe this was the best decision. Upon arriving, Mr. Miller was waiting, ready to welcome Rocky with open arms. Ethan knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but with the certainty that Rocky would be safe and loved, he was determined to face any challenge that came his way. The goodbye was difficult, but he believed that deep down it was only the beginning of a new adventure. The Johnsons' new house was a simple dwelling located in a quiet neighborhood of the city. The walls were a light shade, and the small garden was filled with wildflowers. The move, although filled with uncertainties, brought a sense of renewal. However, the longing for Rocky still loomed over Ethan like a shadow. Every day, Ethan explored his new home, but his mind frequently returned to the bulldog. Before we continue with this exciting story, make sure you are already subscribed to the channel and leave a like on this video to always stay up to date with new content. Thinking about how Rocky was adjusting to the new environment tightened his heart. He knew that the dog wouldn't fully understand why he had been left temporarily, and that consumed him with sadness. As the weeks went by, Ethan tried to settle into his new school routine, making new friends and participating in activities. However, There was always a part of him that felt incomplete. The void left by Rocky was hard to ignore, and he often caught himself daydreaming about the moments they had shared. Meanwhile, at Mr. Miller's house, Rocky was undergoing his own adjustment. The neighbor was kind and attentive, providing the bulldog with the affection and attention he needed. Although Rocky missed Ethan, he was beginning to get used to his new life, especially the long walks he took with Mr. Miller. The walks were filled with new smells and sounds, and the bulldog soon found himself enchanted by everything around him. Noticing Rocky's longing, Mr. Miller began creating special moments for the dog. He made homemade treats, took Rocky to meet other dogs in the neighborhood, and even built small obstacles in the yard for playtime. The bond between the two grew, but in his heart, Rocky knew that his true home was still with Ethan. One afternoon, while Ethan was at school, he received a message from his dad. It was a photo of Rocky lying on the grass in Mr. Miller's yard, a serene look on his face. Ethan's heart warmed at the sight of his friend, and a wave of relief washed over him. Rocky was adjusting, and that was a sign that the decision he had made was worthwhile. After school, Ethan decided he needed to visit Rocky. He wanted to see him in person and know how the bulldog was feeling. With his parents' permission, he went to Mr. Miller's house. As he approached, he felt his heart race with anticipation. When Mr. Miller opened the door, a warm smile appeared on his face. He led Ethan to the yard, where Rocky was playing. The dog immediately sensed his old owner's presence and ran toward him, wagging his tail and jumping with joy. The reunion was emotional, and Ethan knelt down to hug Rocky, feeling the unconditional love that had always existed between them. The visit brought Ethan a sense of peace. He and Rocky spent time together in the yard, running and playing as if time had stood still. The boy realized that although he was in a new house, the love he felt for his dog had not diminished. On the contrary, he felt it stronger than ever. By the end of the day, Ethan knew he would have to return home, but the visit filled him with hope. He promised Rocky that he would see him more often and that everything would be all right. The boy returned home with a light heart, eager to face the new challenges life had in store for him. Days passed, and the visits became a routine. Every time Ethan went to Mr. Miller's house, his confidence grew. He knew Rocky was happy and safe, which helped him cope with his new reality. The interactions between the boy and the bulldog were always filled with joy, bringing relief to the longing he felt. On the other hand, Rocky's constant presence in Mr. Miller's life brought a new purpose to the elderly man. He became a loyal companion, filling the void left by the loss of his poodle. The love they shared became a balm, helping them overcome the sorrows of the past. Ethan and Rocky continued to create new memories, showing that even in times of uncertainty, true love always finds a way to overcome obstacles. Their relationship, although challenged by change, was stronger than ever. Deep down, both knew they were connected in a way that transcended distance. Ethan and Rocky were on opposite sides, but the love they shared united them in an unbreakable bond. Spring arrived, bringing colorful flowers and a renewed atmosphere to the neighborhood. Ethan felt that the new season reflected his own internal changes. The warmth of the sun and the songs of the birds seemed to encourage the boy to open himself up to new experiences. As the weeks went by, he made friends at his new school and began to feel part of the new community. But the presence of Rocky was still a constant in his thoughts. One morning, while getting ready for school, Ethan decided he wanted to write a letter to Rocky. It was a way to express everything he felt, to share with his friend the moments he was living. With a piece of paper in hand, he began to write about the adventures he was having, how he felt more confident and happy, but above all, how Rocky still held a special place in his heart. After finishing the letter, Ethan asked his mother to take it to Mr. Miller. It was a symbolic way to maintain the bond with his bulldog, even from a distance. His mother agreed and promised she would deliver the message. The boy felt relief imagining Rocky reading his words, even if only in his imagination. That day, Ethan went to school with a lightness in his heart. The classes passed quickly, and by the end of the day, he could hardly wait to get home and hear how Rocky was doing. When he arrived, his mother was waiting for him with a smile on her face. She told him that she had delivered the letter to Mr. Miller, who had been touched by it. He also mentioned that Rocky was happier and more active, running around the yard and having fun. With each visit, the connection between Ethan and Rocky seemed to strengthen. They were learning to live in separate worlds, but the love that united them transcended any physical distance. On a sunny afternoon, after a day at school, Ethan decided he would go to the local park. He hoped that the fresh air and interaction with his new friends would help him relax and divert his thoughts from his longing. The park was alive with activity. Children were playing, adults were walking, and the sound of laughter and joy filled the air. Ethan joined his friends and began to have fun. He ran, played ball, and participated in games. The day seemed perfect, but deep down, a small part of him still yearned for Rocky. As Ethan enjoyed himself, fate decided to play an unexpected trick. A group of children was playing ball when the ball hit a nearby fence. Curious, Ethan approached to help retrieve the ball. As he got closer, he caught sight of a familiar shadow, and his heart raced. It was Rocky. The bulldog was at the neighbor's house, free and exploring the area. The scene made Ethan's joy explode in his chest. He ran toward Rocky, calling his name. The bulldog, hearing his friend's voice, turned around quickly, and his eyes sparkled with recognition. It was a magical moment. Happiness spread through the park like fireworks. Ethan crouched down and stretched out his arms. Rocky ran toward him, leaping into his arms as if there were no tomorrow. The reunion was intense, and both seemed happier than ever. The smiling faces of Ethan and Rocky lit up the surroundings, and the joy was contagious to everyone around. Ethan's friends watched, admiring the unbreakable bond between the boy and his bulldog. Mr. Miller soon arrived, a broad smile on his face. He had brought Rocky to the park so he could have fun and run. The scene was perfect, and everyone around began to join in the celebration of the reunion. Time flew by as Ethan and Rocky played together. The boy threw a ball, and the bulldog chased after it, his energy seeming renewed. They had as much fun as in the old days, and Ethan's laughter echoed throughout the park. Mr. Miller watched, happy to see his new friend so joyful. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Ethan realized that this day would be remembered as one of the best. The connection they had was stronger than any change or distance. He knew that, regardless of the circumstances, his love for Rocky and Mr. Miller's affection formed an unbreakable bond. Over time, the meetings in the park became a tradition. Ethan and Rocky continued to see each other frequently, and each visit brought more joy and love. Rocky's presence helped Ethan adapt to his new life and brought a new purpose to the bulldog's heart. That unexpected encounter in the park not only revived the friendship between Ethan and Rocky, but also sealed a new chapter in their lives. The bond they shared was now stronger, and both were determined to make the most of every moment together, regardless of what the future held. Summer brought heat and long sunny days, providing Ethan and Rocky with countless opportunities to explore the world around them. With school on break, the boy spent more time in the park with the bulldog, creating memories that warmed his heart. They ran, played fetch, and even ventured on trails nearby, always under the watchful eye of Mr. Miller. During one of these adventures, Ethan began to notice that Rocky seemed a bit slower than usual. The bulldog was still cheerful and playful, but there were moments when he would stop, panting, after running a little more than usual. Ethan grew concerned, but didn't want this to spoil the joyful moments they shared. One morning, while at the park, Ethan decided he needed to take action. He watched Rocky, who was lying under the shade of a tree, and felt a tightness in his heart. The bulldog looked up at him with his brown eyes, conveying an unconditional love that always comforted him. Ethan knew that his friend's health was important and that they needed to visit the vet. With Mr. Miller's permission, they went to the local veterinary clinic. Anxiety took hold of Ethan as they waited in the waiting room. The familiar smell of disinfectant and the sound of barking dogs created an uncomfortable atmosphere, but the love he felt for Rocky pushed him to face the moment. Finally, they were called in for the consultation. The veterinarian, a middle-aged woman with a gentle smile, examined Rocky carefully. Ethan watched attentively, holding the bulldog's leash, and felt his heart tighten as he saw his friend receive treatment. After a series of questions and a thorough examination, the vet informed them that Rocky was a bit overweight and needed to lose a few pounds to improve his health. Ethan felt relieved to know that Rocky's condition wasn't serious, but the recommendation for dietary changes and exercise made him feel responsible for his friend's well-being. On the way home, Ethan was determined to follow the vet's advice. He discussed a workout plan for Rocky with Mr. Miller. Together, they decided to take longer walks and include new agility games for the bulldog. The idea excited Ethan, who saw it as an opportunity to create new memories while caring for his friend's health. In the following days, the training began. Rocky seemed happy and enthusiastic about the new activities. Ethan dedicated himself to taking the bulldog on daily walks, and soon they were exploring new parks and trails. The bulldog's energy began to return, and Ethan felt proud to see him move with more agility. However, even with all the care, Ethan noticed that Rocky had his limitations. At times, the bulldog seemed tired and needed breaks to rest. Ethan respected those moments, understanding that it was a natural part of his friend's aging process. One afternoon, while at the park, Ethan noticed a group of children playing frisbee. Rocky's playful spirit was awakened, and he started running toward them as if he had rejuvenated. Ethan smiled, excited to see the joy on the bulldog's face, but soon grew worried when Rocky began to pant. With a warning in his heart, Ethan called Rocky back. The bulldog hesitated, but soon turned and returned to his friend's side. Ethan's concern grew, and he decided he needed to be more attentive to his companion's limits. The bond between Ethan and Rocky strengthened as they faced new challenges together. The boy learned the importance of taking care of the bulldog's health, while also cherishing each moment they spent together. The challenges were not only physical, they became a metaphor for life. It was necessary to face obstacles and care for one another, always respecting limitations. Over time, the love they shared evolved, and Ethan realized that true friendship was not just about joyful moments, but also about being present in difficult times. This new perspective became part of his journey as he grew and learned. As summer progressed, Ethan felt increasingly determined to give Rocky the best life possible. The bulldog, in turn, seemed happier and more energetic every day. They were both adapting to their new reality and finding joy in the little things. The connection with Mr. Miller also deepened. The elderly man became an ally in every aspect of Ethan and Rocky's lives. Together, they created a warm and loving environment where the bulldog's health and well-being were always a priority. Mr. Miller, with his knowledge and experience, became a source of wisdom, helping Ethan understand the importance of caring for a pet. Long walks around the neighborhood became a ritual, and Ethan always felt grateful to have Rocky by his side. The bond they formed was unbreakable, and each day together was a new opportunity to learn, grow, and love. As the warm summer days turned into cooler afternoons, Ethan reflected on how the journey of caring for Rocky had shaped him. He learned to be responsible, to value simple moments, and to connect more deeply with his friend. Rocky's health and happiness became his priority, and he was determined to do everything to ensure they lived together for many more summers. Autumn arrived, bringing a magical transformation to the world around Ethan and Rocky. The leaves on the trees changed to vibrant shades of orange and red, creating a stunning backdrop that captivated the admiration of all who passed by. The days grew cooler, and the atmosphere seemed to envelop the two friends in a new phase of their lives. However, behind this beauty, a growing sadness began to settle in. In recent months, Rocky had become slower, although he still enjoyed their walks. There were days when he seemed more tired and less interested in playing. Ethan noticed this with concern, and a previous vet visit echoed in his mind. He tried to be optimistic, but the fear of losing his best friend became increasingly palpable. One morning, while walking through the park, Ethan noticed that Rocky stopped at one spot, looking at a leafy tree. The bulldog seemed to contemplate something, perhaps memories of days gone by. Ethan stopped beside him, stroking the dog's head, trying to comfort him. The connection between them was strong, and Ethan wished he could understand Rocky's thoughts. As the days passed, Rocky's condition began to worsen. The veterinarian, upon examining the bulldog, performed some tests and finally gave Ethan the news he had feared. Rocky was facing serious health problems, and treatment options were limited. Ethan felt his world crumble around him. The vet explained that the best choice might be to allow the bulldog a peaceful transition, letting him depart in peace, surrounded by the love he had always received. The vet's words hit Ethan like a punch in the stomach. He remembered all the moments he had spent with Rocky, and how the bulldog had always been by his side, even in the hardest times. Now that connection was about to be interrupted. With tears in his eyes, Ethan decided that if the farewell was inevitable, he wanted Rocky to know how loved he was until the very last moment. The boy began to prepare for the days ahead. He made a list of all the things he had always wanted to do with Rocky, and they both started living each of those moments as if they were the last. Walks in the park, sunny days at the beach, and even an afternoon of resting under falling leaves became sacred. Every moment was a celebration of the love they shared. At that time, Mr. Miller became a comforting presence, offering support to Ethan every step of the way. He understood the boy's pain and was always ready to listen, providing a safe space where Ethan could express his emotions. Mr. Miller's wisdom guided Ethan, who began to understand that life is a collection of moments and that the love we feel never disappears, even when people and animals depart. One day, while they were lying together on the park lawn, Ethan had an idea. He wanted to capture these moments in a way that could resonate for a long time. With Mr. Miller's help, he decided to create a photo album. The images would be a way to eternalize the story they shared. Ethan spent hours selecting the best photos of Rocky and dedicated himself to creating a collage that celebrated the unbreakable friendship they had formed. Days passed, and Rocky's health continued to deteriorate. Each walk became a struggle, and the joy that once lit up the bulldog's eyes began to fade. One night, while Ethan was stroking Rocky's face, he felt that this moment could be one of the last. He sat in silence, watching his friend sleep, reflecting on all the happy moments they had shared together. The image of Rocky, with his tongue hanging out and tail wagging, was a constant reminder of how their love transcended any obstacle. One morning upon waking, Ethan found Rocky lying in his favorite spot in the living room. But something felt different. The bulldog was quieter, almost as if he were in a deep sleep. With a heavy heart, Ethan approached, gently stroking his friend's body. He felt a wave of sadness wash over him, and the pain of loss began to become a reality. With Mr. Miller's support, Ethan made the difficult decision to give Rocky a dignified farewell. On the appointed day, the boy and the bulldog went to the park, where they spent the morning together, surrounded by the beauty of the autumn leaves. The sun shone softly, as if paying tribute to the love they shared. While they were sitting under a tree, Ethan placed Rocky's head on his lap, stroking him gently. The bulldog, though weak, seemed to feel the warmth of his friend's presence. Ethan talked about all the adventures they had, reminiscing about the joyful moments they had built together. He knew that true friendship was eternal and that the love he felt for Rocky would never fade. When the time for farewell arrived, the veterinarian was called to assist in the transition. Ethan held Rocky's paw, feeling the connection that had always united them. Mr. Miller stood beside them, offering silent support while the vet administered the medication. In the last moments, Ethan looked into Rocky's eyes, and both felt the strength of their love. The bulldog, surrounded by affection, closed his eyes for the last time, and the boy felt a part of his heart bidding farewell along with him. Tears streamed down Ethan's face as he held his best friend's paw, acknowledging that although Rocky was no longer physically present, he would always live on in the memories they created together. After the farewell, Ethan felt lost, but Mr. Miller was there to remind him of the importance of honoring Rocky's memory. Together, they worked on the photo album, where each image was a time capsule reflecting the life and joy Rocky had brought. Ethan learned that love never dies and that true connection remains alive in the hearts of those we love. He promised himself that he would carry Rocky's memory forever and that he would always do his best to honor the legacy of love his friend had left behind. As autumn turned to winter, Ethan felt a wave of peace as he recalled the moments he had lived with Rocky. Although the pain of loss was still present, he knew that each memory was a treasure that would always accompany him. Life would go on, but the love and loyalty they shared would be eternal. Thanks for watching until the end. What did you think of today's story? Leave your opinion in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Until next time.